start off by talking about the potential of this 2026 recruiting class. Now, when we're talking about the potential for this recruiting class, we're not necessarily talking about what individual players we will get. It is still only March 2nd here. So we can be in it for a player today and 2 weeks from now, not even be in their top 3. We could have somebody committed now and they're long gone by the time signing day comes. I'm going to let you start off here for talking about 2026 recruiting class and what you think we can do.
Yeah, well, I think you teed it up pretty well because that's just kind of the world we live in now. I mean, that's always been the recruiting world.
Yeah.
Like it's always been volatile. Guys will be interested in a school. That'll change. They'll commit, decommit. But I think even more so now when you see teams making these late pushes. Maybe some more money comes in that they can make a run for a guy they weren't previously going after that hard. So it's really hard to predict things on a specific level. But I mean, to me, I think I would look to the way that they finished off the last recruiting class. And I would say that is at the very least, because I think, obviously the final rankings left a little bit to be desired, got some good players, not where the class would like, we'd like it to be in an ideal world, but pretty solid considering where it was, midway through the season. But I think that showed at least proof of concept that, a lot of it is just winning. Like,
It is. Yeah.
winning and showing, reasons to be optimistic about the future, for example, DJ Lagway. I think that made a big impact. So to me, I guess like the starting point here for me is how good is the football team going to be this year?
Mm-hmm.
Because things can change. Recruiting is not wrapped up heading into the season. As we saw, things can change really quickly, even getting pretty close to early signing day. So to me, it's like, is this team in college football playoff contention in November? I think that is going to be as important a factor as, NIL or how hard Billy's pushing for these kids. Like there's other factors, but kids want to come win ultimately.
Yeah, I think you hit it right there with the fact that we started winning games. We started showing promise in Billy's development. That's when the recruiting class went from 52nd, 54th to 8th. Which I think really is like what we see, and that can be the potential of this recruiting team or recruiting class for 2026. I think you can also look back at the 2024 class before the 2023 season, where we got as high as like number 2 in the nation before the season started. And we saw it keep kind of unraveling throughout the season to where it didn't even finish top 10. But I mean, then you come into 2024 with the 2025 class. Billy's able to win games and get the momentum, really flip things from that previous cycle to bring it to that number 8 ranking. I think another thing we can look out for is kids that maybe committed before the season or early on in the season that weren't necessarily all about money, but they're like development, relationships. We'll now have a better chance at landing those kids, as well as we're going to be, if we have a season, like you're saying, being in playoff contention, I think there's a good chance we're going to have more money come in. We saw a couple months ago where we raised $2 million for the Florida Gators football team. I mean, that's after 8 wins. Imagine we have 10. Imagine we have a playoff gate team. Imagine we win a playoff game. I'm thinking about the possibility of having our best class. I mean, we had a best class this year since 2014, which was only ranked 8th. I could easily see us getting into that top 5 margin if we're able to replicate and continue doing well what we did at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, it seems to me, and this is hard to say because we are all kind of outsiders looking in on this, but it seems to me that Florida's at least become semi-competitive from an NIL perspective with programs it measures itself up against. I'm not saying it's at Texas level, but I think Florida can make competitive offers to guys with other SEC schools. So what that tells me is that, you have momentum both on, off and on the field with the way last season ending on a 4-game winning streak. You've got DJ Lagway and you closed out with a pretty solid recruiting class, all things considered. So I think there's pretty good reason to think they could build off that and, land multiple 5 stars, get into that top 5 kind of range if they're winning. But there's just so much potential variance here because we could see that. We could see Florida go, 10-2, and that happens. We could see a repeat of what happened at the end of, the Dan Mullen tenure, where kids saw the writing on the wall and started leaving the class even before Dan Mullen got fired. And, that's could possibly be how things end for Billy too this year, like just being realistic. So like, I think Billy really controls his own destiny here in terms of both his job, but also, Florida's recruiting outlook, because I don't think there's any like structural reason to believe that a successful Florida football program will not be competing at a top 10, maybe fringe top 5 level.
I mean, you brought it up about the NIL, how we should be able to compete with them at the highest level. I mean, look at us landing Dallas Wilson and Hilton Stubbs. I mean, Dallas Wilson, you go flip from Oregon, who is like reported to spend the most money with Phil Knight trying to win championships at Oregon, and you flip a 5-star wide receiver from them. Then Hilton Stubbs at Miami. We know Miami's willing to put in money to get these high 4-star level players. So I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. But especially if we can get more money in and hopefully get that top 5 class. You also brought up kids leaving. Like if we do have a hot start like we did in 2023 at that class, but we do start losing games. That's why I have in my notes, we need to have a hot start to the season. If we start off 2-2 with like losing to both LSU and Miami, I think things are going to be pretty tough for Napier to fix, beyond the fact that like getting 8 wins, just repeating what he did, because he doesn't just need to get those 8 wins again. We need to be 9, 10, 11 win team. You're not going to have those recruits being like, oh, well, Georgia, they're still producing elite talent and winning and making the playoff. But it's like, oh, Florida, Billy's a nice guy, I should go there. This is not going to happen. That's just not how recruiting works. They want to go make the most money, and they want to go to the NFL. That's just how it works a majority of the time.
And I think there's another factor too that they want, because, obviously the LSU and Ole Miss wins helped a lot, but that's actually not what kickstarted the recruiting turnaround. What kickstarted the recruiting turnaround was the vote of confidence in Billy Napier, because ultimately these kids want stability. I mean, that wasn't like what made it be as good as it was, but it's what turned the tide from like, wow, this is going to be an awful class to like, okay, Florida at least has like a bit of momentum here. And it's because these guys want stability. They don't want to commit to a coaching staff that's not going to be there in a few months. So if you come out of the gate hot, you beat Miami, maybe you beat LSU, all of a sudden it's looking like Billy Napier's probably not getting fired. And that gives him a lot more leeway to go out and be like, no kid's going to believe you pitching your vision to them if they don't believe you're going to be the head coach next year.
Yeah, I absolutely see that. I think what I'm trying to talk about is us having an elite level class, not just a good class.
Sure.
Like, I'm hoping that with Billy in the future, what he's kind of sold to us, and him knowing that this is a talent acquisition business, is getting to this top 5 level classes and not just top 10 level classes. So that's kind of where I go with winning and not just security. Not just winning 8 games, but winning 10 games.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because NIL will only make up for so much. Like, because at the end of the day, NIL is just the equalizing factor. Everyone's paying these kids. So you don't get an advantage by just having money. They're not going to pick you when they could go make the same amount of money for a team that's actually competing. So yeah, that I think is I mean, we've seen examples of teams that can recruit at that level. I mean, Auburn's been kind of recruiting at that level without winning at that level, but I don't think that's an easy thing to. Yeah, Texas A&M has been doing that. I mean, they have more money than God, but yeah, I mean, I think that is, for most programs at least, the success is a prerequisite to recruiting at that level these days, especially.